The door was already closing when I said my husband's name, not closing slowly the way doors do when someone forgets to hold them. Closing deliberately. My mother-in-law's hand was on the handle, her body blocking the frame, and the warmth and laughter spilling out from behind her stopped the moment she saw it was me. "Oh," she said, "just that." "Oh." I could hear my sister-in-law laughing at something inside. I could smell pot roast and something sweet, maybe her famous apple pie, and the Christmas tree lights were blinking through the narrow gap she'd left between herself and the doorframe. My son, Elliot, was pressed against my leg. He'd been half asleep in the car and I'd had to carry him to the porch. He was 4. He didn't understand why we were still standing outside. "We didn't think you were coming," my mother-in-law said. "We RSVP'd 2 weeks ago," I said. "I texted you on Thursday to confirm." She tilted her head the way she always does when she's about to say something that's technically true but functionally a lie. "Well, we've already sat down. We don't really have room at the table." I looked at her for a long moment. Behind her, someone turned up the volume on whatever football game was playing, and another burst of laughter came from the dining room. "It's Thanksgiving," I said. "I know what day it is, sweetheart." She called me sweetheart the way some people say the word bless your heart, with a smile on the surface and ice underneath. "You can take some leftovers home if you want. I'll have Ryan wrap something up." Ryan, my husband, who was already inside, who had driven ahead of us because Elliot had spilled juice on himself right as we were leaving, and I'd stayed behind to change him, and we'd said we'd meet there, who was, at this very moment, apparently sitting at his mother's dining room table while she turned his wife and child away at the door. "Please get Ryan for me," I said. "He's in the middle of dinner." "Get him anyway." She didn't move for a second. Then she sighed the way she always sighs, like I'm the one being difficult, and pulled the door almost fully shut behind her as she went inside. I stood there on that cold porch in my good coat with Elliot tugging on my sleeve, asking if we were going to eat soon, and I stared at the wreath on the door and thought about every single Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Easter I had spent in that house feeling like an intruder who'd never quite figured out how to belong. 7 years of it. 7 years of showing up with dishes I'd spent all day making, only to have them pushed to the end of the buffet table. 7 years of watching my sister-in-law's new boyfriend get the seat of honor while I sat at the folding table that got pulled out when there were too many people. 7 years of my mother-in-law asking Ryan when he was going to find something more stable than his job at the architecture firm. A job that paid our mortgage, our car, our son's preschool, and 7 years of Ryan saying she doesn't mean it like that on the drive home. The door opened. Ryan stepped out. He had a dinner roll in his hand and a look on his face that I had learned over 7 years meant he already knew what was happening and had already decided he didn't want to deal with it. "Hey," he said, "what's going on? Your mother told us there's no room." He glanced back at the door. "She said the table's full." "Ryan, I know." He crouched down to Elliot's level. "Hey, buddy, you okay?" Elliot nodded, but he was looking at the door. "Is Grandma mad at us?" Neither of us answered that fast enough, and Elliot heard the silence. "Does Grandma not want us here?" I felt something crack open in my chest. Not metaphorically, I physically felt it. That specific kind of pain that lives just below your sternum when you are watching your child's face register something they shouldn't have to register at 4 years old. "Of course she does," Ryan said, but his voice didn't land right and Elliot is not a stupid child. "Then why are we outside?" Ryan stood back up. He was looking at me and I was looking at him, and we were having the conversation we always had in situations like this. The silent one. The one where I said do something, and he said, "Let's not make a scene," and I said, "Your son is standing in the cold," and he said it'll blow over. "I'm going to take Elliot to the car," I said. "I need you to come with us." "Babe, I need you to come with us, Ryan." He looked at the door again. That door. That warm, closed door with the wreath and the lights and his entire family on the other side of it. "Let me just go explain to my mom." "There's nothing to explain. Either you're coming with us or you're not." He chose wrong. He went back inside. I got Elliot buckled into his car seat and I turned on the heat and I found his little stuffed elephant that he keeps in the door pocket and put it in his hands. He didn't ask any more questions. He just looked out the window at the house with the lights on and I pulled out of the driveway and I drove. I didn't cry until we got to the 7-Eleven 3 blocks away. I pulled into the parking lot and I let myself have exactly 4 minutes of it. Ugly and quiet so Elliot wouldn't hear, and then I cleaned up my face with a napkin from the glove compartment and called my grandmother. She picked up on the second ring. "You're not at dinner," she said. She always knows. "We left early," I said. A pause. "Where are you?" "A parking lot." Another pause. Longer. "Elliot with you?" "Yes." "Turn around," she said. "Come here." I've got the whole turkey and nowhere near enough people to eat it. My grandmother lives 40 minutes outside the city in a house that has been in our family since before I was born. It's not a grand house. It's a farmhouse, technically, though the farm part has been gone for decades. She has a porch that wraps around 3 sides, a kitchen that always smells like something good, and a habit of knowing things before you tell her. She was standing on that porch when we pulled in. She must have been watching for headlights. Elliot saw her and perked up immediately. He loves my grandmother. Everyone who meets her loves her. She is 73 years old and has white hair and the sharpest eyes of anyone I've ever known, and she has never once in my life called me sweetheart in that particular tone of voice. She scooped him up like he weighed nothing and carried him inside, and I followed, and the door closed behind us, and the warmth of that kitchen hit me like something I hadn't realized I'd been desperate for. She didn't ask me what happened until Elliot was settled in front of the small TV in the den with a plate of food and his elephant and a blanket. Then she put a cup of coffee in front of me at the kitchen table and sat down across from me and looked at me with those eyes. "Tell me." So I told her. All of it. Not just tonight. Tonight was almost too absurd to be the main story. I told her about the 7 years. About the folding table. About the time my mother-in-law had announced at Easter that Ryan's college girlfriend, whom she'd always preferred, was getting married, and had looked at me while she said it. About the way she'd never learned to pronounce my last name correctly, even though we share it now, and the way she always introduced me as Ryan's wife without using my actual name. About the year Elliot was born, when she told everyone in her church prayer group that Ryan's work situation was stressing the whole family, referring to a period when I had been the sole income earner for 8 months after he'd left a job he hated, which she had found embarrassing for reasons I still don't fully understand. I told her about Ryan, about the pattern, about the way he would squeeze my hand during those moments and then explain her away afterward, every time without fail, for 7 years. My grandmother listened to all of it without interrupting once. She just drank her coffee and listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I need to make a phone call." I assumed she meant a friend, or maybe my mother, who she was close with. I didn't ask. She got up and went into the other room. I could hear her voice, but not the words, low and steady, the way she talks when she's not asking for anything. She came back 15 minutes later and sat down. "Your uncle is a property attorney," she said. I knew that. My uncle on her side had been practicing estate law for 30 years. "I've been meaning to talk to him for a while now," she said. She was looking at her coffee cup. "I have the house. I have some savings. Not nothing. And I'd been thinking about the right way to do this for a while." "Grandma, I'm not done." She looked up. "I have a niece in Colorado who I haven't spoken to in 4 years because of something that isn't her fault and is mostly her husband's fault and partly mine. I have a grandson, your cousin, who I've met twice. Twice, because nobody thought to bring him around." She set down her cup. "And I have you. And you've driven 40 minutes at 9 o'clock on Thanksgiving with a tired 4-year-old because your mother-in-law decided there wasn't room for you." "It's okay," I started. "It's not," she said. Simple and flat. It's not okay. And I've let too many things be not okay for too long without saying so. She was quiet again for a moment. "I called your uncle to talk about updating my estate documents. That's all I'll say about it tonight. I don't want you to think I'm doing something dramatic." She almost smiled. "Even if I am doing something dramatic." I laughed, and I hadn't expected to, and it felt like something releasing. We ate Thanksgiving dinner at 11 o'clock at night. My grandmother and my son and I at her kitchen table with mismatched chairs and the good dishes she only gets out for people she loves. Elliot ate half a drumstick and 2 dinner rolls and fell asleep before dessert. My grandmother let me put him in the small bedroom off the hallway, the one that used to be my mother's, and we sat up for another 2 hours drinking decaf and talking about nothing in particular. Ryan texted me at 11:47. "Where are you? We need to talk." I read it and put my phone face down on the table. My grandmother looked at the phone and then at me and didn't say anything, which is the best possible response. I drove home the next morning. Ryan was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. He looked like he'd been up for a while. Elliot ran to find his Legos, and the house filled with that particular sound of small plastic pieces being sorted, which is somehow both chaotic and calming. "She shouldn't have done that," Ryan said. "I know that." "Okay. But you leaving like that, I left because you didn't." He looked at the table. "She's my mother. She's my son's grandmother. And she told us there was no room on Thanksgiving. And you went back inside." I was trying to smooth things over. "I know you were." I sat down across from him. "You have been trying to smooth things over for 7 years, and it has never worked, and it's not going to work because she doesn't want things smoothed over. She wants things her way. And every time you choose smoothing things over, you're choosing her way." He didn't say anything. "I'm not asking you to hate her," I said. "I'm asking you to stop making me invisible when you're around her. That's all. That's the whole ask." We talked for a long time. It wasn't a good conversation, but it was an honest one, which was more than we'd managed in a while. I don't want to make it sound like everything resolved neatly because it didn't. Ryan is a work in progress. I knew that when I married him, what I hadn't fully understood was how deep the pattern went and how much it would cost us. What happened next, though, I didn't see coming. 3 weeks later, my grandmother called me. "I need you to come out this weekend," she said. "Bring Elliot and bring Ryan." I told her Ryan had a work thing Saturday morning. She said Sunday was fine. We drove out Sunday afternoon. Elliot was asleep before we hit the highway, and Ryan drove, and we didn't talk much, but it wasn't a bad quiet. It was the kind of quiet that happens when 2 people are figuring out whether they still fit together, and neither of them wants to say the wrong thing. My grandmother had made lunch, which meant there was enough food for 6 people, even though it was just the 4 of us. She hugged Ryan when we came in, the full kind of hug, which surprised him. He could see it in his face, and she didn't say anything pointed or significant. She just fed us. After lunch, Elliot went out to the backyard with the old wagon she keeps for grandkid visits, and the 3 of us sat at the table with what remained of the coffee. My grandmother folded her hands. "I want to tell you both something." She explained what she'd been working on with my uncle. The house. A piece of property she'd inherited from her own mother that had been sitting in a trust for years. A savings account she'd built slowly over 4 decades of working, most of it as a school librarian, which people always underestimate. She was not a wealthy woman, but she had been careful and deliberate. And she had clearly been thinking about this for longer than the 3 weeks since Thanksgiving. She looked at both of us. "I'm leaving the house to you, both of you, to your family." She paused. "I want to see you in it. I'm not in a hurry to leave, don't worry. But I want it settled. I want you to know it's settled." Ryan was very still. "Why?" he asked, not ungrateful, just genuinely trying to understand. She looked at him with those eyes. "Because I watched my granddaughter sit in my kitchen at 9 o'clock on Thanksgiving night and try to tell me that what happened to her was okay." She paused. "And because I think you're a good man who has learned some bad habits, and I think you're going to spend the rest of your life unlearning them, and I would like to support that." Ryan put his face in his hands. He didn't cry, he's not much of a crier, but he stayed like that for a long moment, and when he looked up, he was a different shade of himself. "I'm sorry," he said. To both of us, I think. My grandmother reached across the table and patted his hand once. You can start next Thanksgiving. Here's what I didn't know at the time, what I only found out much later from my cousin who'd reconnected with my grandmother around the same time. My mother-in-law had called my grandmother. This was apparently after Ryan mentioned in passing that we'd ended up at my grandmother's house for Thanksgiving. My mother-in-law had called her, a woman she'd met exactly twice, at our wedding and at Elliot's christening, to say that she felt my grandmother should know that I had a habit of being dramatic and creating conflict in family situations, and that she hoped my grandmother wasn't being manipulated by my behavior. My grandmother had listened to all of it without interrupting, and then she had said, very pleasantly, that she appreciated the call and that she would keep everything in mind. And then she had called my uncle, the estate attorney. I asked her about it once, a year later, sitting on that porch that wraps around 3 sides of the house that is now, also in some future tense, mine. She smiled into her coffee cup. People tell you everything you need to know about themselves, she said, when they think they're telling you something about someone else. Elliot came running around the corner of the porch just then, muddy from the backyard, demanding to know if there were still cookies. She told him there were always cookies in her house, and he disappeared inside through the screen door, and she watched him go with the particular expression of someone who is very satisfied with how things have turned out. The Christmas after that, we hosted. Our house, our table, mismatched chairs because we were still building toward the match set. Ryan's mother was not on the guest list. That was a boundary we'd arrived at slowly and together, after many difficult conversations and 2 sessions with the couple's therapist who charged more per hour than I wanted to admit. My grandmother sat at the head of the table, even though it was technically our house. We gave her the head of the table because she had earned it in ways that had nothing to do with being the oldest person in the room. Elliot put his paper turkey craft next to her plate. It had her name written on it in crayon, his handwriting still very much a work in progress. He'd spelled it wrong, but she kept it anyway. She told me later she was going to frame it. Some people protect you loudly. They argue and confront and make scenes. My grandmother did something else. She watched. She listened. She decided, quietly and without announcement, what kind of person she wanted to be in my story. And then she was that person. That's the thing about the right people. They don't always arrive on time. Sometimes they've been there the whole time, just waiting for you to pull into their driveway at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night with a tired kid and nowhere else to go. I keep coming back to that parking lot outside the 7-Eleven, the heat running, Elliot quiet in the back seat with his elephant, me crying into a gas station napkin, trying not to make a sound. That's where the story really lives for me. Not in the dining room where justice happened, not in my grandmother's kitchen where I finally felt safe, but in that ugly fluorescent parking lot where I had to decide what I was going to do next, because that's the moment nobody talks about. Not the betrayal, not the vindication. The moment in between, when you're sitting in a parking lot at 9 o'clock on a holiday and you have to choose whether to fall apart completely or hold yourself together long enough to drive somewhere better. I thought a lot about why my grandmother responded the way she did. She didn't have all the information that night. She had a granddaughter who called from a parking lot and said we left early in a voice that meant something else entirely. And she said, "Come here," immediately. No questions first, no hesitation. That instinct, to open the door before you fully understand what's on the other side of it, that's not something that just happens. That's something you build. My grandmother spent 73 years building it, quietly, without anyone watching. What I've come to understand is that my mother-in-law also spent years building something, just a different thing. Every time she chose her son's comfort over someone else's dignity, every time she used the word sweetheart like a small blade, every small cruelty she decided didn't count because it wasn't a big one, she was constructing something too. And eventually what you built is who you are. That's not punishment from the outside. That's just the way cause and effect actually works in a human life. Ryan is still a work in progress, and so am I, and so is our marriage. But I think about what my grandmother said to him at that table. that she believed he was a good man learning to unlearn bad habits. And I think about the courage it takes to actually receive that kind of assessment, to not get defensive, to sit with it. He did. That took something real from him, and I don't want to minimize it. What Elliot said on that porch, "Does Grandma not want us here?" is the thing that still gets me. He was 4. He didn't have the framework to understand what was happening, but he felt it. Kids always feel it. And I think about the kind of person I want him to grow up to be. Someone who notices when a door is closed to someone who deserves better and opens it. Someone who does what's right even when it's easier and warmer inside. Someone who, if he ever finds himself in a parking lot at 9 o'clock on a holiday, has enough of himself intact to drive toward the people who will leave the light on. That's all I really want for him. Not success the way it's usually measured. Just that. A compass that still points somewhere worth going. My grandmother framed Elliot's paper turkey. It's hanging in the hallway of the farmhouse, next to a photo of my mother as a little girl. He spelled her name wrong, but she said the love in the letters was perfectly legible. I think that's the truest thing anyone said in this whole story.